62 days. 62 days of being used, discarded and stripped of humanity. A vessel for their desires, nothing more than a receptacle for their filth and fleeting pleasure. 62 days of pain. 62 days of starvation. This is my life, or rather, the life that was stolen from me. My name is Kara, and this is the story of how my life changed forever. It all began with an email. A website had posted a request for a house cleaner, and as a broke college student desperate for cash, I jumped at the opportunity. The offer was $300 for a full house cleaning each week, a fortune to someone like me. My heart raced as I read the details. Without hesitation, I replied, expressing my interest. They responded quickly, asking when I could start. I told them I was available any time, and they asked if I could begin that very evening, around 8. They mentioned they wouldn't be home, but said there'd be a spare key under the doormat. I agreed without a second thought, and caught the next bus to the address. When I arrived, the house stood before me like something out of a forgotten time. It was old, with peeling paint and overgrown grass that whispered of neglect. Doubt flickered in my mind, but I brushed it aside and checked under the mat, just as the email instructed. Sure enough, there was the key. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, greeted by a dim, dusty room filled with scattered belongings. The air smelled faintly of mildew and memories left to decay. It was clear I had my work cut out for me. Rolling up my sleeves, I got to work, organizing the chaos and clearing a path through the disorder. I started with the living room, then moved to the kitchen and worked my way down to the dining area. After that, I tackled the bathrooms before heading upstairs to clean the bedrooms. The house was spacious, not enormous, but large enough for a full family. 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, and even a garage. By the time I finished, I was exhausted. I ran water to mop the floors, making sure they were spotless and gleaming. When I finally stepped back to admire my work, the house looked much better than when I'd arrived. Still, something felt off. That strange, lingering smell hadn't gone away. I thought a touch of air freshener might make the place feel more welcoming for the owner's return. So I started searching for some, first in the kitchen, then in the storage cabinets. Nothing. As I glanced around for other possibilities, I noticed something I hadn't before. A curtain hanging in one corner of the house. Behind it was a door I hadn't seen earlier. Curiosity tugged at me, and I moved the curtain aside, revealing what looked like a basement door. I hesitated for a moment. The house was already strange enough, but I convinced myself the cleaning supplies might be down there. I opened the door, and a draft of cool, damp air brushed against me. A narrow, dark stairway led down into shadows. With a deep breath, I descended, each step creaking under my weight. The staircase opened into a small, dimly lit room filled with boxes, shelves, and other clutter I couldn't quite make out. But then I noticed something else, a second door on the far side of the room. It looked sturdy, almost out of place among the disarray. As I approached, a faint noise caught my attention. I froze, straining to listen. It was soft, rhythmic, and unmistakable. Breathing. My heart began to race. I reached out, my fingers brushing against the cold metal doorknob. I tried to turn it, but it wouldn't budge. A strange, unshakable determination filled me. I couldn't ignore the sound I'd heard, the faint, unmistakable rhythm of breathing. Someone was behind that door. I was certain of it. Scanning the room, my eyes landed on a heavy dumbbell lying among the clutter. Without hesitation, I grabbed it, my hands trembling slightly as I raised it over the doorknob. With a sharp swing, the metal shattered the lock, and the knob clattered to the floor. The door creaked open to reveal a long, dimly lit hallway. The air inside was thick and damp, the walls slick with moisture. Every step I took echoed ominously as I made my way down the corridor, my heart pounding harder with each moment. At the end of the hallway I stopped, frozen in shock. A row of large dog cages lined the far wall, but these weren't for animals. Inside each cage were women of all ages and ethnicities. Their faces were streaked with tears, their bodies filthy and barely clothed. Some wore only undergarments, others were completely exposed. They were gagged, their wrists and ankles bound, their eyes hollow with terror. A wave of nausea hit me, but I forced myself to move. I ran to the nearest cage, fumbling with the latch, desperate to free them. One of the women's eyes went wide. and she started shaking her head violently. She tried to scream through the tape covering her mouth, but only muffled sounds escaped. Before I could process her warning, pain exploded in the back of my skull. My vision blurred, and darkness swallowed me whole. When I woke, my entire body ached. Cold metal pressed against my skin, and as I opened my eyes, the horrifying reality sank in. I was inside a cage now. My wrists and ankles were tightly bound, a gag muffling my cries. I was stripped down to my undergarments, just like the others. Blood trickled down the side of my head, the metallic taste of fear filling my mouth. Across the room, a man moved methodically between the cages. He was feeding the women like they were animals, dropping scraps of food into their cages without a second glance. When he noticed I was awake, he walked over, crouching just outside the bars of my prison. A twisted smile spread across his face. "Thank you for accepting my application," he said calmly, his voice cold and devoid of empathy. I screamed at him, tears streaming down my face, my voice raw with anger and fear. "You monster!" I shouted, the words trembling with desperation. He only laughed, a low, chilling sound that sent shivers down my spine. Without a word, he turned and walked away, the heavy door slamming shut behind him, plunging the room back into suffocating silence. Weeks rolled by, my days filled with nothing but torture and humiliation. We were barely fed, forced to crawl on all fours, and made to endure unspeakable things multiple times a day. One day, the door creaked open, and our captor stepped inside, followed by 2 men in suits. For a brief, fleeting moment, a ray of hope flickered within me. I thought they might be FBI agents or detectives here to save us. But that hope was extinguished as quickly as it came when I saw the way they moved, calculated, predatory. They walked around the room, observing us as if we were livestock at an auction. "How much are you asking?" one of the men said, his voice cold and businesslike. $20,000 each, our captor replied casually, but the younger ones cost extra. One of the men stopped, his gaze locking onto me. A slow, sinister smile spread across his face. "How about her?" Our captor chuckled, glancing in my direction. "She's newer, 19, blonde, good-sized bust. For her, I'm thinking $40,000. The man didn't hesitate. "You've got a deal," he said. "Sold," our captor replied with a grin, sealing my fate with a single word. I was blindfolded and led away, my footsteps echoing against unfamiliar walls until I arrived in a vast room. The floor was cool marble beneath my feet, and the air was thick with the haunting strains of opera music. Rose petals lay scattered like bloodstains across the ground. They secured me to a frame, gagged, exposed, vulnerable, and left me there in silence. A moment later, the door creaked open. He entered, draped in a dark robe that seemed to swallow the light. His gaze swept over me, claiming me without a word. "You're mine now," he said, his voice low and final as he closed the door behind him. And so began 64 days. Days of pain, days of pleasure, days that would redefine the rest of my life.
I hope you enjoyed this short story. If you did, please consider leaving a like, sharing your thoughts in the comments, and subscribing for more stories.